Okay, so we're looking today at a truly extraordinary place in Cairo, an area just woven with centuries of history, faith, and this remarkable story of a community's resilience.
That's right. Yeah, we've been digging into insights from a really detailed study that, explores the heritage of old Coptic Cairo. It looks at the archaeology, the conservation efforts, and, well, the very real challenges these sites are facing.
It does, and it uses specific places as examples, sort of windows into the bigger
Yeah,
picture.
exactly.
So our aim here really is to pull out the most important threads from this material. We want to understand the layers of history, the unique character of these places, their deep significance, and maybe most importantly, what actually needs to happen to protect them.
And, to really grasp the essence of this area, you kind of have to start with Coptic Church in Egypt itself. The research really highlights their incredibly long history, stretching right back to the first centuries AD. They are, as one viewpoint in the source describes them, great survivors, just navigating through immense change, periods of persecution for, well, millennia.
That's incredible staying power.
It is. And it's fascinating. Even the term Copt itself has these ancient roots,
Yeah.
comes from Egyptos, the Greek word for Egypt.
Right, Egyptos to Copt. That makes sense. Okay, so that long view is really essential background. Now, let's zoom in a bit on a specific spot the source looks at closely. Heret Zuela. If you were trying to sort of picture this place, where exactly is it?
Well, the source places Herzliya within what's generally known as the Islamic district of Cairo. Specifically, it's in the Karun fish area.
Okay.
And an important point the material makes is that this isn't some, isolated enclave. It's part of a really dense, dynamic urban fabric where different communities, different historical layers, they all just exist side by side.
Not segregated zones, then?
No, not at all. And it's also relatively close to other very old churches found in that wider area, often called Babylon or Old Cairo.
Okay, and the history there isn't just vaguely old Cairo old, is it? I mean, the archaeology gives a more precise time frame.
Exactly, yeah. When you look at the archaeological work done nearby, particularly near sites like the famous Abu Sarga Church and Ben Ezra Synagogue, it points to churches in this specific area being established in the early medieval period.
Early medieval. So we're talking what sort of dates?
We're talking roughly between, say, 644 and 715 AD. So while it's deeply historic, its roots are firmly in that medieval era, well after the Roman period ended there.
Right, right. So imagine you're walking through this historic district, maybe picturing what it was like back then, and you arrive at a place like the church complex at Harat Suwaila today. What does the source tell us you'd actually see? What are the physical details like?
Well, the source paints a picture of a place that's showing its age, definitely, but also its continuous use. And yeah, it struggles. You'd notice the walls, for instance.
Okay, what about them?
You've got sections of modern concrete right next to older masonry. There's one spot holding an electrical box like a very modern intrusion.
Huh, yeah.
And quite tellingly, you see the damage from groundwater constantly rising. There are these visible stains, crusts forming on the lower parts of the walls. It just reveals this ongoing battle with moisture.
That sounds relentless, that fight with water. What about underfoot, the floor?
The floor is noted in the source as being concrete.
Concrete floors, modern electrical boxes. These details immediately tell a story, don't they, about the challenges of keeping a centuries-old building going in a living city.
Absolutely.
Are there other architectural features that stand out?
Yeah, there are archways connecting two churches within the complex. The source points out that these have unfortunately been replastered fairly recently.
Oh, okay. Why, unfortunately?
Well, this new plaster actually covers up older historic brickwork. You've got medieval brickwork in the Al-Adra section and 18th century brickwork in the Abu Safin section, all hidden now.
Ah, so it's a case where a repair, maybe meant well, has actually obscured the history.
Kinda, yeah, it's one of those conservation dilemmas. But there's also one specific piece the source flags as highly significant, a real architectural treasure.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The ambon. That's the raised pulpit, the reading platform.
Right.
It's particularly important because, as the source notes, it's one of only 3 medieval examples still existing in Cairo.
Wow, only 3 in all of Cairo.
That's what the study indicates.
Yeah.
And remarkably, it's still used regularly today.
That's incredible.
It is. You can see its structure supported by columns, and it also shows signs of partial reconstruction. Patches of plaster, concrete, again illustrating that mix of ancient survival and, well, challenging modern upkeep.
Yeah, that constant tension. Now, beyond the architecture itself, there's a feature linked to a very powerful local belief, isn't there?
Yes, the well It's located against the eastern wall, and there's a strong local tradition, a belief, that the water from this well has healing properties.
Healing properties? Why?
It's deeply connected to the tradition that the Holy Family rested at this very site during their flight into Egypt.
Ah, okay. So that links the actual physical place to this foundational story.
Exactly. It gives it immense spiritual significance tied directly to that narrative.
And that narrative has incredibly wide resonance, obviously. So, okay, bringing these things together, the physical state, the deep history, these beliefs, what's the overall significance of Heret Zuela, according to the source material?
Well, its significance is really layered. I mean, first off, at a fundamental level, it's a vibrant, active local church. It serves the Coptic community right there in the Crunfish district. That's vital.
The living community aspect.
Definitely. But then it also holds global importance. That belief about the Holy Family's visit, that gives it relevance far beyond Egypt. It connects it to Christian faith worldwide.
Makes sense.
And it positions it as a key stop on the Holy Family tour route that's promoted.
Right, so tourism comes into play too.
It does. And then from an architectural history perspective, elements like that rare medieval ambon are just invaluable historically.
Unique artifact.
Unique artifacts. And finally, it also has what heritage folks call group value. It's part of that crucial collection of non-Muslim historical religious buildings you find across Old Cairo and Babylon. It's one piece of a bigger puzzle.
So it's alive with local faith, it's connected to a global story, and it's packed with unique historical details. But as you mentioned, the source makes it starkly clear that all of this is under threat. What are the main challenges? What's endangering a place like Heret Zuela?
The most pressing physical threat, the one really emphasized for Heret Zuela, is the severe damage from the high water table, that constant groundwater seepage.
Damp we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Those stains, the crusts on the walls, that's the visual evidence of this major, major problem.
Yeah.
And it persists, even though they've tried things, like installing a pump. It's an ongoing battle.
So the water is number one. What else?
Beyond the water, there's the issue of past interventions, the use of inappropriate modern materials, things like concrete and modern plaster. They often cover up, or just aren't compatible with, the historic masonry.
Right. They might even trap moisture or cause other problems.
Precisely. It's a recurring issue mentioned in the source repairs that fundamentally alter or even harm the original character of the building.
And it's not just water and maybe some misguided repairs, is it? The source talks about other issues affecting Coptic sites more generally.
That's right. There's just the simple wear and tear from visitors. You know, things like repeated rubbing of surfaces, the ambon, for example, being touched by countless hands over centuries. It's noted as being vulnerable to that kind of slow erosion, losing fine details over time.
Yeah, the cumulative effect of many small actions.
Exactly.
And who's actually responsible for navigating all this, for looking after these sites? The source seems to describe a pretty complicated management situation.
It is quite complex. So the Coptic Church owns the site itself. But any significant conservation work needs official approval from the Ministry of State for Antiquities.
Okay, so there's an overlap of authority.
Right. And funding can be a mix, too. Sometimes it involves private heritage groups chipping in.
Like any HRA mentioned in the source.
Exactly, like any HRA. But this structure, it can create a bit of tension sometimes. The source notes this friction that can arise between professional heritage experts, on one hand, and the local caretakers, like the monks who actually live and worship at the site.
How so?
Well, the local community, understandably, wants to maintain their sacred space. But they might attempt repairs themselves, maybe using materials or methods that, from a strict conservation standpoint, aren't ideal. And sometimes that can unintentionally cause damage.
Ah, I see. So there's this need to balance the expert conservation knowledge with the very real, on-the-ground care and ownership from the community living there.
That's a really good way to put it. It's a delicate balance.
How does visitor engagement fit into this whole picture of preservation? Does the source touch on that?
It does. It suggests that helping visitors understand the site better is actually key. You know, things like clearer information, maybe better signage, something that helps people appreciate the history, but also the fragility of the place.
So education leads to respect.
Kind of. The idea is that understanding can lead to more mindful behavior, potentially reducing some of that unintentional damage we talked about. It's about engaging visitors so they feel a sense of shared responsibility, perhaps.
Makes sense.
The material also floats the idea of involving the local community more directly in, say, monitoring and recording the site's condition. though it acknowledges that could be challenging given traditional professional roles in heritage management.
Right, sort of blurring those lines a bit. Okay, so thinking about everything we've covered, looking at the details from the source, it just reveals such a layered story in a place like Heretzuela. You really see the deep history and faith, the unique architecture, but also these constant physical battles it's fighting and the complex human effort involved in its survival.
Precisely. You've got a place potentially visited by the Holy Family with medieval foundations still visible, still serving its community every single day, containing these rare architectural gems, all while grappling with rising damp and the complex legacy of past repairs. It's quite a picture.
It really is. So reflecting on the story of Heretzuela and the broader challenges facing Coptic heritage that the source illuminates, it kind of prompts a bigger question, doesn't it, about responsibility.
How so?
Well, what is the collective duty, you could say, of the present generation, both within Egypt and maybe globally, to ensure places with such profound historical and spiritual significance actually endure for future generations?
That's a huge question.
It is. And maybe how can all these different groups, the local custodians, the church itself, government bodies, international experts, maybe even visitors, how can they genuinely collaborate effectively to achieve that shared goal? It feels like a really complex puzzle, with deep implications for how we look after the world's diverse heritage.